Thank you, everyone. That has been a great opportunity for me to share my research idea with you. And my heartfelt thanks to the college. So yes, my heartfelt thanks to non-Bengal St. Xavier's College and the Department of Sociology and English of this college. I understand I work in the academia as well, and we know that academia has this struggle to manage funds and organize things, and these are not very easy take. And the college, in a not at a central location, it's really difficult for them to organize, to gather resources and resource person. It's not easy for them. So yeah, my sincere thanks to the college authority, the departments, concerned departments, and as well as IQSC for extending their generous support and vision in organizing such kind of initiatives. And I'm really delighted to see so many young faces in front of me who probably would get materials or ideas for them to work in future. Like many of you may become future researchers in the field of South Asian studies, partition studies, and I would be very happy if you find any of my research ideas relevant for you and can take it further, can question it, can challenge it. I would be very happy with that. So yes, the title may seem a little unsettling or discomforting, because I'm saying that lessons we need to unlearn from partition research. So what does that mean? Does it mean that partition research has really no significant accomplishment? I definitely do not want to say that. Over the 7 decades, partition research has significant, crucial achievements, major achievements, and it has begun with very nationalist, statist history and narratives and historical accounts divided between India and Pakistan initially. But interestingly, over the decades, and particularly in the latter half of its existence, partition research in the last 3.5 decades or 4 decades, partition research actually has posed significant challenges and critical engagement with these nationalist and statist narratives and accounts. And it has actually transcended the cartographical boundaries. It has transcended the boundaries of nations and states and started looking to the others' experiences, accommodating the others' experiences, and through that challenging the monoliths of nation, and through that challenging the monoliths of state. So this is crucial achievement indeed. And particularly I would like to mention at least 3 major achievements of the partition research so far. Number 1, that came from the feminist oral historians in the field, particularly Urvashi Butalia's words is with us today. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it physically. We'd all be delighted to have us physically among us. But her words are there, her books are there, and many of us are already familiar with her writing. So many, like Urvashi Butalia and many other, like Ritu Menon, Kamla Bhasin, and many others in the field of partition studies, they had significantly contributed and make feminist interruptions in the field of history and bring up oral historical accounts of the partition survivors. So that was important, because bringing the experiences of women and argument, like Veena Das argued about this relationship of gender, violence, and making of the state and nation. So this is important, that violence is not meaningless, is not insanity, but often violence had been triggered to shape the nation in a particular way, to shape the nation state in a particular way. So drawing upon these experiences of the women, subjective experiences, painful experiences of these women, unsettling the nationalist, what should I say, picturesque scenario of history. So this is important, that oral historians and their contribution, feminist oral historians and their contribution in the field, for the first time, actually, even though if they do not want to challenge the nationalist statist historiography, but their presence itself and their work itself often compelled us to think beyond the nationalist statist framework. That was the number one. Number two, there is these interruptions from literary and creative genre, like fiction writers, novel writers, filmmakers. They have contributed so far and often beyond the academia, without confining themselves to the academia, without confining themselves to the academic bureaucracy of publication and research. Like creation of film and creation of novel, creation of stories, often they were interested to look into the territories beyond their realm, like they want to transcend the experiences of the nation, of the state, and look into the others' experiences. And often later scholarly endeavors had been taken up to compare like stories of Bangladesh, stories of West Bengal. And a comparison would help you to see how partition unfolded and how partition has impacted upon the literary practice or creative practices across the border. So this is important. This is also very important, that to transcend the nationalist statist paradigm and to look into the experiences of the other. And finally, and this is important, very important, that decentralizing the partition research. Previously, partition research was confined toward Punjab, and Bengal was like kind of lagging behind. So there was this Punjabocentrism, as partition researcher says. Then there came the experiences of the Bengal. But in narrating the experiences of Bengal, West Bengal was at the center, East Bengal was not at the center. East Bengal, Bangladesh, and in particularly about Bangladesh, you know, 1971 had taken place, and birth of the state and nation in at a different stage, and that has affected the impact of partition or understanding of partition in Bangladesh in a very different way. So there is this thing like West Bengal was at the center of understanding Bengal experiences of partition, but East Bengal was lagging behind. Then there came these issues of Assam and Tripura. And if we look at today's Assam, today's Tripura, and the issues of NRC and those things, they are completely, you can't understand the issues of NRC without looking at 1947 and its prolonged aftermath. So this is very important, that today's politics, today's social and cultural life, even at the periphery, how they are like unavoidably related or essentially related with 1947 partition. And in recent years, this scholarship actually, this accommodating these peripheries and diversified narratives and experiences, this is a very new phenomena, and this decentralization in partition research is also a significant achievement, I consider. But even after mentioning these three major achievements in partition studies over the decades, and particularly in the latter half, like last 3 or 4 decades, these crucial achievements, I would still say, as Ananya Jahanara Kabir, a scholar from Cambridge, in her research, she has coined the term Indocentrism. Partition research is confined or shaped still in an Indocentric way. Indian experience from India is at the center. I'm not going to say that this is homogeneous. I'm not going to say this is monolithic, that anything about Indocentrism is there as a monolith. There could be diversity, but the experiences of India is at the center. And others' experiences in the partition research in South Asian studies remained at the periphery. So to identify that, or to qualify this term, Indocentrism, I would mention at least four points. Number one, loss or sadness or negativity, or like I should say loss, remain at the center in partition research over the years. Anything we start talking about is about shedding tears, it's about rapture, it's about leaving behind your childhood, leaving behind your ancestral place, and this suffering and this sadness, this is at the center. I'm not saying that this is insignificant. This definitely is highly important and one should look into that. However, looking into only loss or confining, like making a single story about loss, whenever we talk about partition, it becomes synonymous. This is a saga of loss. So this is important, that look into Pakistan. 1947 for them was jubilation. That was an emergence of new identity, a Muslim nationalism and new identity. Whether you like it or not, the reality was there and it happened there, and people asserted their new identity. Like my father in Bangladesh, who was at the same time Bengali, but at the same time Muslim. This Bengali Muslim, we say Bengali Musalman, the category, that significantly has this dichotomy and dilemma. Like you really have to look into, like they have this assertion, they find that Pakistan was meaningful at their youth. So this is important. Now it was buried in Bangladesh. This fascination or dream of Pakistan had been buried in Bangladesh within 24 years, and 1971 came up, and it was a claim of secular Bengali nationalism in Bangladesh. But that doesn't mean that fascination for Pakistan was not there. Pakistan was there and the reality was there. So partition, at one of its major part, partition is all about sadness, but on the other part, partition is also about claiming your identity, jubilation, joy, celebration. Whether it's sustained or not, it was historical and it had taken place. So you really have to engage. Without engaging that, you can't understand the regional politics. You can't understand the politics in South Asia. You can't understand the politics in the nation state in Bangladesh. You can't understand the politics in India or Pakistan. So you really have to transcend this synonymity of partition as saga of loss. We really need to transcend that, number one. Number two, when we talk about the East Bengal experiences, this is all about the exodus of non-Muslim population from East Bengal to West Bengal and India. And you know, it continued over the decades, and it has, in a changed political scenario, it has other important like vocabularies. These Muslim infiltrators are coming into Bangladesh and changing the political scenario, affecting the political scenario in India. The center is like loudly saying that at the provincial level, these things had become major issues. So this is important. Well, definitely Bangladesh, like East Bengal, historically was basically a poor peasantry. During the partition, East Bengal, we have to admit and understand, East Bengal, now known as Bangladesh, was a poor peasantry, and the education level was not very high at the time. So the education center of education in Bengal was Calcutta, and in West Bengal, wealth was in West Bengal. Wealthy non-Muslims from East Bengal had migrated, a significant of them, not happily of course. They were forced to migrate at some point of their life, and they had migrated. So Bangladesh, when it came up in 1971, is literally a poor peasantry with little education, and economic hardship compelled people often to cross the border. And William Van Schendel clearly has said how the economic migrants in the borderlands of Bangladesh now is being dubbed as like Muslim infiltrators in the politics of India. So this is also important, that exodus is important, but to portray the exodus in a certain way is also, and then there was this exodus of the from West Bengal or from Bihar, from Uttar Pradesh to East Bengal as well. The Muslims from non-Bengali speaking Muslims from Uttar Pradesh, from Bihar, from West Bengal, they also migrated to East Bengal. We hardly have discussed about them in the partition studies. We do not talk about the Biharis who ended up in East Bengal with a horrible life in East Bengal, because they went in East Bengal hoping that East Bengal is Pakistan, East Bengal is Pakistan, and that is a Muslim land. And when it became the land of the Bengalis at the rise of Bengali nationalism, the country is no longer for them. So what about these trajectories of the Biharis in East Bengal? We don't talk about the exodus of the Biharis, but we one-sidedly talk about the exodus of the non-Muslims from East to West Bengal or India, but we don't talk about the exodus other way around. Number 3, in partition research, there is this celebrated concept, 2 celebrated concepts at least. Number 1, partition, to portray partition as surgery. Number 1, to portray partition as surgery. Nation is the body, like a morphological explanation that nation is the body, and there was this infected limb. We have to truncate it. We have to operate it and take it out, take it off. So this is this idea of, to save the nation, we have to separate Muslims in Pakistan, dump the Muslims in the Pakistan, and we have to have our land, our secular India, because Muslims are not compatible with secularism. So this is important, that this idea of tailor-made use of this term surgery, and I am sure many of you are familiar with this literature of Joya Chatterjee. She has argued how this term of surgery is incapable to accommodate the reality, and how it put gloss on the like active participation of the Indian and Pakistani politicians, undivided Indian political actors. Like when we talk about the surgery, like this is the disease of our, a disease had taken place in one of our limb and we have to take it off, and for that the British were the surgeon. So we were just a patient body, like we were just passive, we have nothing to do. Joya Chatterjee is arguing that partition was all about negotiation, bargaining, and political interest of groups and community in the name of communities. This has been like calculated political bargaining. So when we say that, surgery hardly can understand or explore that what was our part, what was the Indian intelligentsia and political figures were doing, what was our responsibility, what was our part in partition. It's very easy to put the blame on the British. It's very easy for being an Indian to put the blame on Pakistani. It's very easy for being a Pakistani to put the blame on the Indians. But look into yourself, stand in front of the mirror, and if you look into that, the idea of surgery hardly fits. The idea of surgery fits with the colonial narratives, that the British were the like impartial surgeon, and Joya Chatterjee argued they were not. And then the Indian actors, Congress and Muslim leagues and their leaders, they were not impartial as well, or passive at all. They were much involved in the process of this partitioning or divisioning the countries, or dissecting the countries. So this is one thing. The other concept is, the other problematic concept is the idea about the Bengal partition. We used to say this idea of prolonged partition. That partition is not an event that had been done in 47, and no event in history is actually a cut and dried thing, like it just had happened at a certain moment and it's just done. Whenever it takes place, it has consequences over the generations, over the following generations, over the decades, in the coming days. So this is important that we say that partition, when we say about the prolonged partition, about Bengal partition, it has been said the Bengal border is porous border. Porous, porous border. So Bengal border remained porous, And through that porous borders, these Bangladeshi people are entering to India, and that has been the continuation, that has been understood as the continuation of partition till date. So there is element of truth in that. I'm not denying that it's not happening. Definitely there are elements of truth there. However, the idea of prolonged partition should be stretched to many other areas. And this narrow or shallow idea of porous border actually fits with the Indian perspective only. But if you look about the experiences of from East Bengal, you will find there are many other issues. As a partition researcher, I like to address at least 3 or 4 more areas that can be stretched that can be understood by using the concept of prolonged partition that I will unfold later on soon. Then the other thing about Bengal is very sensitive thing is the claim of nostalgia. Nostalgia has been understood like much celebrated idea of aha dui Bangla roikko. This is this unity of Bengal, like partition only divided the land, but we are still same. Obviously, nostalgia is important. Your ancestor is stuck in Bangladesh as a minority. My ancestor probably stuck in somewhere here as a minority. Nostalgia is important at your personal life. Nostalgia is important in understanding the family and the community and the individual. However, nostalgia shouldn't take off the entire discussion in the realm of history, because a collectivization of nostalgia or nationalization of nostalgia is highly crippling. Nationalization of nostalgia, like claiming aha dui Bangla roikko, Bangladesh ebong Bharat, like they often celebrate like about the centenary of Rabindranath Tagore and these, and that's fine, that's absolutely fine, but the state is there. An uneasy relationship between states are there. State is there, nations is there, politics is there, and the reality is 1947 had created India as a regional superpower comparing to its other neighbors. So that has tricky relationship with this sweet nostalgia. This nostalgia is no more an innocent thing, and we really have to explore how we shouldn't allow us to take up this concept of nostalgia uncritically and use it in the partition research. Rather, we should critically engage this idea of nostalgia and bring up, I would rather say, there are bitter moments, there were moments of awkwardness, there were harshness between exchanges of two Bengals, Bangladesh and West Bengal. Pratidin, if you go to YouTube, you will find there is this reality show like Mir Afsar Ali hosts this reality show Miracle, and the Bangladeshi contestant is doing great here, and the Bangladeshi comment box in YouTube is flooded with, oh, go Bangladesh, go, Shabash Bangladesh, and this and that. And then there is these bitter responses from the West Bengal, and these responses are more like sophisticated, cultured responses, I would say. So this is interesting, and at one point, like Mir Afsar Ali intervene and address this YouTube bout between Bangladeshis and West Bengalis in the reality show. So this is important, that nostalgia, sweet nostalgia, hardly able to understand the awkwardness, the harshness, the bitterness, and I would say to understand the history, to understand the impact of partition till date, we really should look into the harsh realities, harsh exchanges. Sweetness is there, nostalgia is there, amity is there, friendship is there, fraternity is there, but we should go beyond that. We should look into how historically two nations, like two Bengals, has been shaped in a very different trajectories. Like particularly after 71, Bangladesh and East Bengal has a different journey, and that has affected their mind, and that has consequences on their mind. And that often is not very easy. So I would say that we should go beyond the nostalgia. So what I'm saying, that these areas like monopolization of loss or absolutization of loss in the partition research, collectivization of nostalgia, then there is this single story of the exodus, and these like tailor-made use or shallow use of some celebrated concept in partition studies. It often remain loyal to the Indian nation state, and it often disregard the understanding of partition outside India. And by outside India, I am drawing up on the experiences of East Bengal, East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. So by drawing up that, I would rather say, the 4 points I just have discussed, I would rather say why I am saying that we have to unlearn those tendencies and what we should look into now. So this is the last third part of my address. So now I would say, by unlearning those 4 things, what we should learn or what we should do, what we should look into in partition research for our future. Number 1, as I said, loss was there, but there was this jubilation. There was this claim of Muslim identity, and in Bangladesh there is this claim of Bengali Muslim identity. And claim of Bengali Muslim identity is far from an straight-cut thing. Bengali Muslims were never, someone from Bangladesh, a scholar from Bangladesh, Dina Siddiqui, has emphasized this idea that Bengali Muslim has been struggling with double burdens. One burden is they try to be Muslim, but for Pakistani, they were never been Muslim enough. They tried to be Bengali, but they were never been Bengali enough to the West Bengalis. To West Bengal, they are Bangal. To West Bengal, they are like, their Bangla is even Bangal Bhasha. আমি যে ভাষায় বাংলাদেশে কথা বলি, them, this is just a Bangal Bhasha. And so this is interesting. So the assertion of Bengali Muslim identity was full of contradiction, full of dilemma, and that contradiction and dilemma should be taken into account in partition studies. So there was this joy, jubilation that was short-lived, but at the same time, there was this dilemma. They wanted to be Pakistani, but they wanted to be Bengali as well. So number 1, we really have to look into that joy and jubilation. Like I was sharing my family story yesterday that I actually discussed in my book as well. My father, his childhood was spent in Malda. My dada, my grandfather, was a service holder in the Malda court. And my father's school was Malda Jilla School, and college was Malda College. Then his eldest sister, my Pishi, Amar Boro Fupu, she had her education. She started her college in Bethune College, Calcutta. So it was a question for me, for my Boro Fupu, Calcutta was the avenue. For my father, the avenue was rather Dhaka University. Why? Because the drum beating of partition had started. It was late 30s and early 40s, and my father went in Dhaka University. He had completed his undergrad and masters from Dhaka University and started his job in Malda College again. He came back to this part because the social capital was here. He was reared up in this town, so he has acquaintances here, he has connections here. So he started his job here. But then he started looking job on the other side of the border. And at some point, he moved to a very old college, like a century-old college in Pabna Edward College. And he started teaching there in the early 50s. And soon after he started teaching there, just within 2 years, he became the vice principal of the college. How? Because all the senior Hindu professors had migrated to India. So my father, as a young lecturer, just take up the charge of the vice principal. And soon he became principal, and he continued as a principal for 10 more years there. So this rise of my father's personal career is completely related with partition. So you can't deny partition just as saying loss. At an abstract level, it was joy, jubilation, assertion of new identity. At a concrete level, it was material gain. It was economic, social gain for the Bengali Muslims in East Bengal. So how you would deny, and you would be overshadowed by the story of a saga of loss, and you ignore this, the other part, that will be a partial understanding of history only. So that is one thing. The number two, whenever we talk about the East Bengal experience, and whenever we talk about the exodus, I said about the Bihari experiences. Think about the Biharis. The Biharis, like the many of your ancestors who came from Bangladesh to India or West Bengal, they didn't necessarily happily migrated for India. Nobody wants to give up their ancestral land. Nobody wants to leave behind their childhood. Nobody wants to leave behind their fond memories or friends and everything there, or resources, house, homestead, or material or assets. But people had to. So the Biharis is the same with the term Bihari is problematic. In Bangladesh, we use the term generically, but by Bihari, we don't necessarily mean people from Bihar. We mean actually non-Bengali speaking. We also say Urdu speaking. Abangali, Urdu bhashi, Bihari amra boli, kintu, but they are from Bihar, they are from Uttar Pradesh, and some of them from even West Bengal. So these families, they had to give up their ancestral land. They have to give up their childhood. They had to leave behind their childhood in India. They went in Pakistan. And for them, Pakistan was not West Pakistan. For them, Pakistan was not Punjab, because Punjab was far away from them. And for these Biharis, it was beyond their reach. But many of these Biharis, and actually poor Biharis, who tried their luck, even many years before the partition, Biharis used to go to East Bengal, and it's like the migrant workers, still people come from the rural areas, from villages to the city center, work here, stay here for a few weeks, several weeks, few months, save some money, go back to their place and spend the money, and then come back to. It was the same story before partition with the Biharis. They know the route to go to East Bengal. So now these Biharis, after partition, East Bengal was the only Pakistan they knew. So they went in East Bengal, and they thought it will be there. They said that Jinnah Sahab called that we got a Tuta Pakistan, but we will make this Tuta Pakistan as a golden Pakistan. It was a broken Pakistan. It was a moth-eaten Pakistan, but we will transform that Pakistan to a golden Pakistan. That was the dream of the Biharis. But soon after the arrival, they realized the Bengali nationalism is growing up there. And the Pakistani central administration, in a very calculated way, used the Biharis against the Bengalis. Because to counter the Bengali nationalism, the Pakistanis used this Biharis Muslim identity, and Biharis like they give the feeling that you are more Muslim, better Muslim than the Bengalis. The Bengalis are already half Hindu. They speak the same language like the West Bengalis. So this is the thing, that the trajectory of the Biharis from hero of 47, they actually survived 47, and upon their blood and sweat, they were dreaming to build up a new Pakistan in East Bengal. But within a few years, they started becoming identified as the villains in East Bengal. From hero to villain, and at 71, they become stateless. And they said, many of the Biharis said, We didn't leave our country, the country had left us, the country had abandoned us here. So this statelessness of the Biharis, they cannot go back to Bihar or Uttar Pradesh because already in India they will be labeled as Pakistani spy because they were loyal to Pakistan. So they have no point of return to their ancestral place. Pakistan is not ready to take them back because you never came to Pakistan, you were in East Bengal, why we have to take you? So after 71, they opted for Pakistani citizenship, and Pakistan only took few of them, but many stuck there. They are not even getting refugee status. They are completely a stateless population. Until 2008, from 1971 until 2008, Biharis had no identities in Bangladesh, no legal status in Bangladesh. So if you don't understand the exodus of the Biharis in partition research, and you just look into the exodus of the non-Muslims from East to West Bengal, that is very one-sided. You should look into the experiences of the Biharis and the exodus the other way around. We should look into that. That is the other point. The third thing is, when we say about the prolonged partition, we talk about this exodus thing, that the border is porous. That is also interesting. Who kept the border porous? Who kept the Bengal border porous? We should question that. Because the Punjab border had to be sealed right at the moment of partition. The violence was at that level that authorities from two dominions had decided right at that moment to close the border, to seal the Punjab border. But Bengal border was kept open. Why? In the inter-dominion meeting in by the end of 1948, in the inter-dominion meeting between Liaquat Ali Khan and Jawaharlal Nehru, there was this meeting. They decided that Bengal requires a psychological treatment for partition. They said that psychological healing, because the landlords from Bengal had crossed the border. So let's give them some time so that they can come back after a situation is restored, calmness is there, peace is restored. They may come and settle their properties and lands. So the border was kept open and lenient. Now, after the emergence of Bangladesh, this now is identified as the porous border. It was kept open by the decision of the statesmen, by the politicians, and now people are blamed to cross the border, of crossing the border every day. So this is important. Border is one thing. Look at the border violence, look at the border killing. Why don't we look into the border and we look into the migration as prolonged partition, but we don't see border violence as prolonged partition. We don't see border killing as prolonged partition. We don't address border killing in partition research. Why we don't address border killing in partition research? Why we just look into the border crossing as partition research, but not border killing? There is this disputed issues about the river. As like Debjanidhi was saying, she is upset seeing Tista yesterday. Like Tista, we have this issue of water sharing between Bangladesh and India. This is created by partition. This awkward relationship between two states, an unequal relationship, because two states are not standing on the same plane. So this is an unequal relationship between India and Bangladesh. So this emergence of India as the regional superpower is related with partition. Why we don't stretch the idea of prolonged partition to examine that? Why we don't understand the idea of prolonged partition to understand the disputed issues over resources, like presence of India and unequal, like India has asked for transit to its states through Bangladesh. One part of, like goods from one part of India will go to other part of India, but to lessen the cost, they have to cross it by Bangladesh. Now there is this question of nationalist, statist issues of security and those things. Why we don't see these debates and discomforts and awkwardness, why we don't see these as an issue of prolonged partition? why the use of prolonged partition is only confined to the migration from Bangladesh to West Bengal. So this is, I think, is highly problematic and very one-sided approach to understand. And then there is this nationalization of nostalgia. As I said, it's crippling. Why it's crippling? There is this superior inferiority complex among the Bengalis and East Bengalis, and this is historical. I'm claiming that this is historical. Like Bangladesh, there is this caricature about West Bengal people, that West Bengal peoples are like very paternalistic, and the term is like dada. They are like dada. সব সময় দেখে টেকে রাখে আর কি, হ্যাঁ, তো দাদাগিরি, the দাদাগিরি of West Bengal, and they have this all sorts of like what should I say, condescending jokes like that West Bengal people are not hospitable like East Bengal. দাদা কি খেয়ে এসছেন নাকি গিয়ে খাবেন? আপনার বাসায় অতিথি এসছে, আপনি তাকে বলছেন দাদা কি খেয়ে এসছেন নাকি গিয়ে খাবেন, তার মানে আপনি অতিথিকে খাওয়াবেন না। ইস্ট বেঙ্গলের লোক ক্লেম করতে চায় যে তারা খুব ভরপেট খাইয়ে দেয় অতিথিকে, কিছু না থাকলেও খাইয়ে দেয়, আর ওয়েস্ট বেঙ্গলের লোক করে না। এই যে ব্যাপারগুলো, এগুলো হিস্টোরিক্যাল, এটাকে মনে হয় যে এখনকার, কিন্তু এগুলো হিস্টোরিক্যাল। বাংলাদেশের লোক হাসাহাসি করে যে কলকাতার বাজারে 100 গ্রাম বা 200 গ্রাম মাছ বিক্রি হয়, but this is historical. You really have to understand the psyche and the formation of a psyche at a given political social scenario. The migration, the self-settled refugees from East Bengal to Calcutta, and how the hardship they had faced. And if we really don't go into that, look into that, we really don't understand. So there was this private TV channel in Calcutta. I don't see that channel anymore. Ekushe TV Bangla, there was this private channel. And they have this reality show named Borishaler Bor, Kolkatar Kone. If anyone have watched any of this episode, when you say that, the name says it all. Borishal is raw, uncouth, they cannot say proper Bangla. Korsos, khaisos, emne Bangla bole. They do not know the manners, they are not educated. And this is linked with the poor peasantry of East Bengal as well. So Borishaler Bor is embodiment of this raw and uncouthness, and this is a fun reality show. And there is this Kolkatar Kone mane hoche embodiment of refinement and culture and education and class. So these are already there. These are already that. This is relationship, because you know Muslim League had been successful in East Bengal, raising this communalization of class. Tajul Islam Hashmi, the political researcher, he says that this was the issue of Muslim. They made this issue for Muslim League among the poor peasantry of East Bengal, that look, the Hindu zamindars are joddars are the reason of all your suffering. And if we can evict the Hindu joddars, if we can get rid of the Hindu joddars, you Muslim peasant will establish your own utopia. The name of his celebrated book is Pakistan, A Peasant Utopia. So he says that, and the Muslim peasants believe that, and they believe that after Pakistan they have nothing, they don't have money, they don't have a gun to protect the border, but in the borderland they have all these rituals of march past, parades, and showing off their Pakistani identity. So this is very interesting that the historian Ahmed Kamal, he is saying that Pakistan was a land of eternal Eid to many in Bangladesh. Pakistan was every day was a Eid day at the beginning. Well, this happy marriage didn't continue like all other marriages. So it didn't continue for longer. But the thing is, they claim that Pakistan began with a very happy beginning. The thing is, against the poor peasantry of East Bengal, education was in Calcutta. Salaried middle class, the Bhadraloks, was formed in Calcutta. So these divisions, in one hand there is this urban-based, cultured education and salaried middle class. On the other hand, there is this less educated, poor peasantry. of East Bengal. So this is historical. And then Nilesh Bose saying in his fascinating write-up named Purba Pakistan Jindabad, Nilesh Bose is arguing that Purba Pakistanis were keen, many of the Purba Pakistani writers and authors and editors were keen to assert Purba Pakistani identities which will be Pakistani but Bengali. They want to write poetry in Bangla, fictions in Bangla, imagination of the land and the geography and the ecology, but at the same time blending with the Islamic tradition. They want to distance themselves from West Bengal. They want to distance themselves from Pakistan, from West Pakistan. So there is this Bankim Chandra wrote this Durgesh Nandini, and then there was this less known Ismail Hussain Siraji from East Bengal, from Sirajganj. He wrote Rai Nandini, and Rai Nandini was about the Muslim boy marrying the non-Muslim girl. So there is this counters, the exchanges, the historical battle in the realm of literature was even there. So this has somehow relationship with this, with the superiority and inferiority complex today. Like even in Bangladesh, there is this common, the Little Mag people who publish Little Mags and write fictions or articles and things, they often say, okay, we have read most of their authors. Have they read ours? The question comes from, you can see, you can treat, the question comes from this inferiority. আমরা তো সবার নাম জানি, আমরা তো সমরেশ মজুমদার, আমি জলপাইগুড়ির ওপর দিয়ে একবার গেছি, আমি তো এই আংরা ভাষা নদীর নাম জানি সমরেশ মজুমদারের গল্প থেকে। তো আপনারা বাংলাদেশের কজনের লেখা পড়লেন? This is not my question. This is the question from the Bengali newly emerging intelligentsia. The question is, we know their part. Why don't they, why our bhasha is Bangla bhasha and their bhasha is Bangla? And then our childhood imagination is shaped with Manna De, Hemonto, Lata Mangeshkar. How many of our singers are familiar in West Bengal? This is about cultural refinement, treating and looking down to other, looking upward. This relation, this unequal relationship is historical. So why don't we transcend this shallow frame of nostalgia? And why don't we question this awkwardness, this bitterness, this unequal relationship between the two Bengals? Why we don't question that? That is very important to dismantle the nationalization of nostalgia. We actually should go beyond that. So there is this tendency in Bangladesh these days that claiming, okay, they say this is Bangal Bhasha, but this is the language. This is the language we speak, and this is Bangla. So they wrote, one guy, the book is not even published from a commercial press, but he published, and he published this huge volume named Purba Banglar Bhasha. So this is a new Bangla. Like the Websterian, you have no problem to accept Websterian dictionary. So this is a Purba Banglar Bhasha. And the claim is Purba Bangla has historical differences from Paschim Bangla. Why we have to look into Calcutta always? So this claim or reclaim of Purba Bangalitto is also very important to transcend the nostalgia. We really should go into that, and we really should look into that. So this is what largely I wanted to share with my thoughts of the research. So this is what I say, that we have to unlearn some of the long established tendencies in partition research. Rather, we should look into the least explored areas and challenge those previous tendencies of understanding history. I think I've said it all. Many thanks for your patience. Many thanks for carrying it along with me. Thank you.